Welcome back! After Lesson 1, you should now have an idea of what a relational database is, why it might be helpful, and how the data is stored within it in tables. Today we are moving on and we are going to talk about SQL and Fairy SQL. After today's lesson, you will have an understanding of what SQL is and how this is the language you will use to talk to the database. You will also be introduced to Fairy SQL, the SQL program that is used in Cinderella's kingdom. So what is this SQL, or SQL business, as some people call it? It stands for Structured Query Language. SQL is the language you will use to communicate with a database. Just like English or any other language, words have to be put together in a certain way to make sense. One more definition and then we'll move on to the fun stuff. SQL statements or SQL commands are basically giving the relational database instructions and getting the relational database to do what you want it to do. SQL instructions to the relational database can include creating tables, putting data into those tables, and getting data out of those tables. A SQL instruction is just a set of words put together in a certain way, kind of like a paragraph. Like a paragraph, SQL instructions have a certain syntax. By syntax, I mean the arrangement of words and punctuation and the order of certain special words in the instructions. I want you to close your eyes for a moment and picture any of your old English teachers. Okay, you can open them. When you were picturing your English teachers, did you picture any really tough, persnickety ones who are super strict about punctuation, paragraph structure, and word choice? Well, SQL is just like that. It can be very picky about words, punctuation, and order of certain keywords. But if you put all of those words together just right, you'll get the relational database to do what you want. As I mentioned in an earlier video, there are a variety of different SQL programs. We will be using the Fairy SQL program, a fictional SQL database, because it has pretty purple screens for the user and a fun name. But in the non-fairy tale world, there are lots of SQL programs, like MySQL or Oracle SQL. Using a different SQL program is kind of like having a different English teacher. Your past English teacher expected certain things in a good paragraph, but wanted you to keep your language as concise as possible. And your new English teacher expects similar things, but also likes really flowery words. Despite their differences, what both English teachers expect is overall the same. They expect words to be put together in a way that makes sense to them and gets your point across. Throughout this course, we'll touch on many of the instructions or commands or statements that you can give the relational database, like words to use to create tables and insert data, but we'll spend the majority of our time on SQL query syntax, or the SQL statement that is used to get data out of the system. So if you were on your computer and opened up Fairy SQL, you would see this screen pop up. If you look at the menu, you would have a few different options. You could create a new schema, select a schema already created, or get help from the Help menu. So a schema is simply a collection of tables in a database. Someone used SQL commands to create tables inside the database, just like the subjects table we saw in the last lesson. So if we chose Select Schema, we might see a variety of different schemas that have been created. Cinderella_1 is the schema that we will use throughout this course, as it has the tables created based on Cinderella's data needs. Once we choose Cinderella_1, we will see a pictorial representation of the schema. We can see all of the tables that were created and then some lines that show the relationship between the tables. Now our menu has changed a bit. We have some options. We could enter a new SQL command or view the catalog. If we select Enter a new command, we can enter any SQL command such as create a new table or put data into the table, delete data in a table, or get data out of the table. The catalog houses all of the queries we have completed in the past. The screen for SQL commands will look like this. In the text box, we can enter words, and when we hit submit, we will be communicating to the database. We'll get quite a bit more in depth with SQL commands, but on this screen we have entered a simple SQL command. In this case it is a query or the command used to get data out of the database. With the words select first underscore name, comma, last underscore name from subjects, it is simply telling the database to return the first name and last name of all of the subjects in the subjects table. After the query is written, we will hit submit and voila! Our words to the database did something. They returned data. Writing select first name, last name from subjects returned a chart filled with the first name and last name of the subjects in Cinderella's kingdom. Now Cinderella will certainly have more subjects than is shown on the screen, but there is not enough room on the screen to show all of her subjects. You can click on the More Results button to view more results. This output with column names, a first name and last name, and rows of data below, returned from our query is called a result set. A result set is simply the column names requested in the query and the rows of data below. So remember we talked about the database being like a picky English teacher? You know how if the English teacher is marking your homework for poor grammar or syntax, she or he will use a dreaded red marker? Well, the database is kind of similar. If we were missing something in our query, we would get an error message from the database. So in this case, the database is expecting a comma between first name and last name. And if we hit submit before putting it there, we would not get a result set like we did the last time. This time we would get an error message from the database telling us we're not going to get results. Now that you have an understanding about what SQL is and how it helps you talk to the database, and you have been introduced to the specific SQL program we will be using throughout the course, Fairy SQL, it is now time for an activity and then on to lesson 3, where we will meet the team who will transform how data is stored and used in Cinderella's kingdom.